before I was this annoying bloody woman that didn't shut up and was a hater. But it turns out I'm pretty regular. I am just an ordinary mum, really. And now I share all of that. But before that, I think before that was also a coping mechanism, because all of the horror that came my way, much of it I caused, it was always okay in some way because I knew who I was. I still know who I am, but I never showed her. So there was just this arrogant, obnoxious cow that people thought was me, but the real me was always just this. So that was like having a life jacket almost, like a self-preserver, because the person they were attacking, that wasn't who I was. I was always just this.
How are you, Katie?
I'm really well. Yeah, I'm really well. I'm probably as well as I've ever been in my whole life. So that's a great thing. Yeah.
Katie, could you start off by telling me where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Yeah. So I grew up in the West Country, so right at the bottom of England, the bit that goes into the sea. So if you come to the UK, you go from Land's End in the north to John O'Groats in the north to Land's End in the southwest. I'm virtually there at the end of the earth. And I went to a tiny little school that was run by nuns, a convent school. Had to wear a kilt and a horrible green shirt and a green tie. And green isn't my colour in any regard. And I was very much a little town girl. So I worked in the local cake shop when I was 14, and I worked in the Wimpy. I was a Wimpy waitress at 14 as well. So my roots are very much country, and my background, I guess my family's background, is farming.
And how would you describe your childhood growing up?
I reckon it was about as, I don't know what normal is, but like if normal is a mum that stays at home, a dad that goes out to work, dinner on the table at 5, what we called it tea on the table at 5 o'clock with dad sat at one end of the table, no messing, no elbows on the table. You come home from school, you change out of your uniform, you do your homework, and after your homework you can watch some TV, and then you do the same the next day. So very at home, a very kind of, I don't know, 1950s idea of family life, and then walk to school, convent school. My grandmother went there, my mother went there, my sister went there, I went there. Super, super, super traditional in that sense. So nothing risky, nothing out of sync or out of the ordinary. Everything kept very, you don't sort of cause attention, you don't draw attention to yourself, and you just sort of quietly get along with being good British people.
And what was your education like growing up?
Nuns, I mean, I've always thought convent schools were kind of crazy, because like, who was it that decided, oh, you're a nun, therefore you can teach math, or you're a nun. I mean, I get the RS thing, but you're a nun, here we go, you're going to teach chemistry, or being taught by nuns is bonkers. And I will say, not all nuns are nice. Sister Bede, Sister Philomena made my life sort of as hellish as they could, because I learned stuff pretty quick, I was fast, I could come top at stuff without probably trying as hard as a lot of people. I was left-handed. And back in my time, bear in mind I'm 47, even though people think I'm like 63, white skin, what can I say? They used to tie my left hand behind my back at school because it wasn't godly. It was a thing, right? It's ungodly to be left-handed. Left hand is the work of Satan or some such. And they would keep me in to try and teach me to write with my right hand. So, but I'm not trying to make out it was sad existence. It wasn't. It was very regimented, very controlled, very disciplined. You didn't mess with the nuns, and you didn't mess with my father either. People were generally kind of scared of my dad.
And as well, Katie, have you got any siblings?
Yeah, I've got one older sister, and we are opposite, like as opposite could be. She's taller than me and older than me, but she's also she's probably an ideal daughter in the sense that she has had the same job all her life. She married someone and stayed married to them. He's had the same job all his life. Everything is organised and controlled, and they have spreadsheets for things. And so my random, chaotic and hectic and outspoken lifestyle is at complete odds with her. So I wouldn't say that we don't speak, but we speak politely. So I wouldn't say we don't get along, but I'd say that we don't get along like I see some sisters sometimes, and I would love to be like they are, like best of friends. But that isn't me and my sister. And I understand from her point of view, I'm a massive pain in the arse, probably. And I feel like her life would, it makes me kind of struggle for breath to think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was getting emotional then.
No, but it's sort of a claustrophobic idea when I think of life like that.
And as well, you're saying you're there obviously having a very chaotic, outspoken lifestyle. What kind of backlash have you had from being so outspoken?
I mean, and this is probably why I don't like to talk about myself, even though people probably have the idea that that's pretty much all I do, a bloody big mouth woman. But if people were to see, they'd see I don't really ever talk about myself. So I have this thing about not being, not complaining or not feeling sorry for myself. And somehow that's been there my whole life, about you don't feel sorry for yourself. And I guess it comes from actually being grown up where you don't show the neighbours if there's something wrong inside the family. You keep it inside the house. You don't let anyone see your flaws, right? And so that's really gone deep in me, or did for much, much, much of my life. The first 40 years of my life, you know, I was a massive epileptic. I used to have huge seizures, and all of those were kept hidden because my mum used to call them my little turns, and no one was allowed to speak about them. And I think that's actually, that feeling has stayed with me all my life. So I wouldn't tell people what was happening to me even in later years, because partly I have to own it. I'm responsible for it. I'm accountable for it. Anything that's happened to me, I've brought on myself. So I have to suck it up. And I actually 100% believe that. But then I suppose there's an additional layering to it, which has been extreme in terms of things that have happened to me as a consequence of being me, but also have been extreme. So, you know, after my jobs went, so Daily Mail, my radio show, and for the last 5 years, the possibility of me even speaking anywhere in the UK was completely removed. I hadn't said a word in the UK for 5 years until last September. Jobs, home, with litigation that went on because I misnamed someone in a tweet, which was not correct. A tweet I apologised for, I deleted, I retracted, but still new law was made up just for me that says if you do something like that, you defame someone in a tweet. The new law says that if you perceive I caused you serious harm, you can sue me for damages. And I fought that because that's a dangerous precedent to set. But it turned out the law was changed and amended such that that became law, and that cost me my family home. So my job, my home, my children, that's what people was, I guess, the line where usually that will silence an individual if you come for their kids, because I can take all the punishment I think I deserve or I am meted out. But when it's your children, so my children would be reported, I would be reported as an abusive mother. Social services were called often. Social services would come to my home from different counties, West Midlands, all over the place, interview my children when they were little, with the view to having them taken away. And then a couple of jihadis based, I think, in London, but they plotted to come and take my head. And in the middle of the night, my home was rigged up by a team of men dressed in black because the threat was real and present. And those two jihadis are now, or just that man and that woman, whatever they were, are now in prison. So I guess in terms of a sequence of job, home, kids, head, that's the consequence for me speaking out in the UK.
And have you got much online hate, online threats?
I mean, that was constant back in the day. It doesn't happen now so much. A, not on Twitter. B, that was a sort of an era ago. Like the idea that people would now say, I'm going to come, I'm going to put your kids in the car and you torture and you're going to, we'll watch you burn. That used to be the sort of stuff people could send. And I received that, every single day for 10 years. But that doesn't happen anymore. And I don't mind it. I'm kind of glad in a way that got cleaned up before the next generation came along. But there was a time when it was definitely a free place for everybody to say they were going to come and stab you.
And how was that affecting you mentally?
There was always this, and I guess that's the evolution of stuff, is that as I've got older, I've reconciled, and maybe I'm doing it every day now, I think, is reconciling more things with who I really am, such that, so things like me saying, I have to suck it up. It's my issue. I'll deal with it. I never talked about epilepsy ever, right up until I was 40. Because I kept it private. Now I talk about it openly, and I try and make it so that I can speak with other mums who have kids who are epileptic and stuff, so that, because it is lucky, I've got cured now and I'm so lucky. So I've stopped hiding a lot of stuff, or trying to be super ball-bustingly brave, or whatever the phrase is, depending if you're a fan or a hater. And then I also now, I think, I used to keep my personal life, so me, my husband, my children, I never once talked of them. And any interviews anyone could find of me, historic, before the age of 40 something, I always kept them, I separated them entirely. It was just me. And after a point, in the last couple of years, 5 years or so, I integrate that now, because the threat is gone. I no longer have jobs, so a lot of that, the direct threat to my children has gone. And now I talk about all of my life really, really openly. And it's been a real change and a real helpful and positive thing. And that's why I think so many people have kind of done a 180 on me, because before I was this annoying bloody woman that didn't shut up and was a hater. But it turns out I'm pretty regular. I am just the ordinary mum, really. And now I share all of that. But before that, I think before that was also a coping mechanism, because all of the horror that came my way, much of it I caused, it was always okay in some way, because I knew who I was. I still know who I am, but I never showed her. So there was just this arrogant, obnoxious cow that people thought was me, but the real me was always just this. So that was like having a life jacket, almost, like a self-preserver, because the person they were attacking, that wasn't who I was. I was always just this. And so that allowed me to survive it, I guess, or just bob along on the surface, or not drown in it. And there's definitely times that I've been pushed absolutely to a point where, you believe the only way you can silence the noise, because that's what it is really, isn't it? The only way you can silence the noise, especially when it's in your home, on your phone, is I'm going to stab you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your kids. The only way you can get away from it is to just walk out your front door and never come back. And I've absolutely been there. And I absolutely understand it. And it's not an irrational act, not in any regard. It is simply an act of, I guess, selflessness, that the way to protect your family is for you to be gone. So it definitely has pushed me to beyond the edge of existence. Like Caroline Flack, I get. I 100% get. She had 5 minutes to make the noise go away, and she made that decision. And I get it.
Tell me about your epilepsy a little bit, Katie.
So I started having these weird seizure things at about 18, 19. And all that would happen would be I would be doing this, and we'd be like this, and I'd be back. And you'd say, "You all right?" And I'd say, "Oh, sorry, just thinking about something else." But actually, I was having petit mal seizures, they're called, and you disappear for a moment, and then you come back. And instead of being honest, which is what I would now always, if you're a young person and you have this and you're hiding it, please email me, email someone, ring me. Now, start off by being honest right at the start and say, "Look, I don't know what's going on, but something's strange. It feels a bit like seizures." Don't say, "Oh, no, I'm fine, it's fine, I'm silly me." And that's what I did. And that's what in a way I'd been taught at home. I'm not blaming my parents, but problems we didn't have. I did this. I got straight A's for my GCSEs. I did my grade 8 violin at 14 and got a distinction. I did my grade 8 piano at 14, younger than anybody in the school, and I got a merit or whatever. And you don't have problems, you just have success. And so epilepsy was not something I could have. And so I kept on hiding it. And I hid it when I decided I was going to join the British Army and fight for my country and be the first female general. And I went to Sandhurst and sponsored by the Intelligence Corps to be an army officer. And I knew I had epilepsy and I hid it. And that's a terrible thing because you're lying to your country, you're lying to decent men and women who fought for their country, you're lying to the system, you're lying to yourself, you're lying to everyone. And I thought, if I can show and prove that I'm better than my epilepsy, if I can make it through Sandhurst, they'll let me into the army because they'll know I was tough enough. And so I did. I got all the way to the end of Sandhurst, which is a year of essentially being brutalised. And I hid these seizures because they were still petit mal. They were still just absences and back you are. But the pressure on me to try and hide them was huge. And in the end, I got caught just before I passed out of Sandhurst, which is where it's the last day, it's graduation, you go up the steps, and instead of going left, you go right, and you can take your little things off your epileps, and you have your army officer. It's a massive day. And I was caught just before it. The medical officer checked my records, found out that these possible seizures were happening. I had a small seizure on the parade square. That's what triggered the whole being caught. And so on the day that everybody at Sandhurst graduated and passed into the British Army, I was kept back and removed and sent home. And so I was back home. I signed up to serve my country 35 years. And the next day I was back home without a job. And my seizures then, for the next 20 years, my seizures just grew and grew and grew. And all that while, I never told anyone. So all of Good Morning Britain, all of The Jungle, The Apprentice, all that, Katie Rules the World, all done without ever telling anyone really what my problem was. And by then I was having 2 or 3 seizures a night, and the seizures would dislocate my arms from their shoulders. And they've been out, I think, 38 and 42 times. And that would happen in the night with sleep epilepsy. And so people would come and I'd go to A&E, ER, A&E here, and have them relocated. And then in the next morning, I would get up and go again and not tell anyone. And that was all my truth, that I never, and that was going on. So when I lost my home, my jobs, you know, she's the biggest monster there is. In my private life that I spoke to you about, that was way back over here, that was going on. But out here, I was the biggest bitch in Britain, super tough, you know, Teflon Katie. So the divide in many ways, I suppose, I've never spoken about this stuff. It's so weird. And for good reason, obviously. The divide between who I was on, which is the same person, same me, it's not put on. I mean everything I ever said. I won't apologise for anything. But this person was increasingly over here because this person here was really not doing very well at all. And to the point, so my epilepsy kind of dudes at the Royal Hospital for Neurology, so it was 40 years old, I was told. So I was 32. I wouldn't make it to 40, that a seizure would get me before I was 40 years old. And there were many, many times I wished for that. You know, if you wake up with both your arms dislocated, dislocation is much worse than pregnancy. I've done 3 of those. And, you know, I would bite my tongue off or bite through my lips. Well, one of my lips is weird, or my teeth are wonky. You smash your face and things. So it was like a private war going on at home. And I guess that partly allowed me to be tougher in real life because someone saying they're going to come and burn you or stab your kids or was never as bad, I suppose, as what I was facing at home. So that was pretty wild. And now I'm 47 and I'm on extra time and have been for 7 years in my book. And the reason I was going to borrow you is, can I borrow you? It will be better. I've got a hair slide here, so I'll move that because otherwise it's even weirder. So I'll borrow your hand. It's not sticky. You don't need to be squeamish. So that is the skull they cut. And then I can make if I do this, can you feel it moving?
What's that?
That's my brain. So they took a circular, you're right. I thought you were going to go there. They took a circular saw to my head and they chopped out my skull. And then they went in with this big team for 14 hours and found the thing that's like a tumor, but like a knot in some wood. And they cut it out and threw it away. And then they do try and put your skull back. But mine, I got meningitis and it wasn't looking so clever for a bit there. We got to the very edge of walk the high wire between life and death, you know, the precipice of life. I've stood there and it worked. And that team of people over 14 hours took my epilepsy with my skull. And so I've been completely cured. And then I had my arms sewn back on and they used bits of me to build new arms. So I have new arms and I guess I kind of got reborn. So it's been epic, and no one really knows that story because I never tell it. Yeah, and that's the truth of, I guess, who I am.
I was going to ask, what was your worst memory of your life?
Oh, and it wouldn't be that. No, it wouldn't be any of those things that happened to me. I guess my worst thing has been being let go out of the army. And I'm definitely not, I don't think I'll ever recover from that in the sense that it's all I wanted to do. And I'm such a believer, like if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Excuse me. I don't let people down. Like that's one of my big things. I know lots of people's big thing is you don't let people down, but and also I kind of pride myself in the idea that I guess I'm unstoppable. And even at that early phase, that was my one thing. That was what I was going to do with my whole life. And it absolutely was rooted in wanting to defend a country or be proud or help protect a country or help protect people or make people feel safe. I really, I love those things, and those things are in my everyday now. And I think that's why I continue to be on the road as I am all the time nearly. It's my only way of feeling at home is by being on the road. Discomfort to me in a way is really comfortable. And so like 3 months on the road across America, I know America's not uncomfortable. It's very first world problems. But what I mean is not having a home, moving every day, every other day, performing on stages or going to places other people won't. I'm much more comfortable there. And I think it harks back to trying to find something that I couldn't do. And that's probably more about that idea of always being tougher than, is trying to kind of maybe overcome or just that I can't reconcile with the fact that I had to leave something for this condition that ate me up for quite a while.
On the back of that, Katie, what would you say is the best memory of your life?
Do you know, I feel like there's not like a moment. I hate to say like it's not my marriage and it's not the birth of my children, because like those are the things you're supposed to say. And I don't feel that way. Like I really love my kids and I'm really glad I've got them, which makes them sound a bit like a handbag. But like childbirth and children are just a cool part of my life, but they're not like, they're not the best thing. The best thing is the family and like when they're hanging out and they're having a laugh and the kitchen's full and everybody's like got crazy stuff going on. One daughter's doing this, one daughter's trying to ride a motorbike, one son's trying, like, I love that. But the best stuff in my life, it's got to be the now stuff, which is, like, I love life now. I'm as free. I don't know anyone that's more free than me, in the sense that I'm not allowed to own stuff, because if I accumulate anything, people eventually will come and grab it. It will be taken from me. I've seen that at work. It's very thorough when you're going to be silenced and removed. So I get to be about as free as you can be, because I don't own stuff, and I can't under my name. If you get stuff in your meat, it'll be taken one way or another. My children all have different names and are separated from me, in the sense that I'm not linked to any of their lives. Like, I've never been to any of their schools or never been near any of their jobs. No one would. I've cut them free from me in an outside way, so that to remove that issue. I get to just do this, which is be on the road, try and bring people together, try and remind people why, we will get through this. And that's what the last 2 years of lockdown were about, trying to let people know we were going to get through this together. And I'm on extra time. So not only am I free and I'm not tied to anything, I'm free, that every single day is genuinely time I was told I didn't get. So that I am perfectly unstoppable. And so any rules now and things, I don't, you get that. I don't really like rules, because I don't think we should be restrained in the way that we're supposed to be. I don't think anybody should be constrained. So currently unvaccinated people aren't allowed to go to the States still. That's still a law. That's still a rule, but it makes no sense. So I go anyway. And I have no fear of anything that might stop other people. Self-preservation, the need to look after finances, the need to look after home, relationship, your car. I don't know. I don't have any of that. And prison doesn't scare me. So I go, because what are you going to do? What, lock me up? Okay, go on then. And I don't mean that in a, go on then, what are you going to do? Lock me up? I mean it genuinely. You're going to lock me up for going to the States, gathering people and trying to make them feel better. Go on. So, and that really, it's so, I see fear in people. I see nervousness. I see people who won't go out or are scared of this place or that, or these people or that. I don't have any of it. And it's just, it's so lovely. And I'm so grateful to people. I know there's lots of people who hate and stuff, and that's totally fine. Like I'm not in any way oversharing my private life with you to try and affect anybody's views of me. But what's been so lovely about the last few years of reconciling more of that lady that I hid with this same lady that I am, is that people have come with me. And so a lot of people have done a bit of a 180 and gone, oh, I thought you were such a twat. And I still am. Like, I can be a mega twat. Like, I'm annoying. I can say things you disagree with. I can be really forceful in my opinions. I put on 4 stone and lost it again to prove fat people are lazy. That's annoying. But now the support out there is massive. So, a guy today walked by and went, all right, Katie, keep going. And that's such a cool thing. Not because, oh yeah, someone said keep going, but they see me and they see someone who won't back down, won't get beaten, won't apologise, and doesn't mind that you don't agree, or I don't mind that you don't like me. That's all right. So it's been awesome. And I don't know what's coming next, but listening to your story this morning, and I just feel like if you just keep following your true path, great things do happen. And I feel that in my life.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So I was going to get a couple of your thoughts, I guess, on current affairs.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Andrew Tate?
So I'm so happy for that boy. Like, a bit like a show, right? If you don't want to go to a show, you don't buy a ticket. But it's great that show's on, because then the people that do want to go can see it. And that's how I kind of feel about Andrew Tate. For people, you might not want to hear about him, but you've definitely got that choice because you just don't click. So I love that he's back. I love that wherever he's back, I don't even know, but Twitter, wherever. And I love that he exists. My 14-year-old son was talking about Andrew Tate before I knew who he was at all. And then, of course, at the minute that I found out who Andrew Tate was, he's banned from everything, because that's the way this world works. Once someone rises up to that pinnacle, they have to be obliterated. But I love that he's out there. And to me, in my understanding, this sort of uber, ultra masculine, male power, not backing down. I love that that's an option for my 14-year-old son to dial into. And my kid's like, well, I don't like everything. And my son says, well, I get that loads of people think he's crazy. And like one of my daughters is like, he's a misogynist, he's an asshole. And my son's going, yeah, but some of what he says I quite like. And so it's quite nice, actually, that within your family, you've got that going on. And so I like that he's there for that reason. And then the daughter that was slagging him off, my husband said, well, have you watched some of his stuff? She goes, no, but everyone says and I'm like, this is me. Have you met Katie? No. Or have you listened to her? No. But everyone says she's a complete twat. And my own daughter's doing that now about Andrew Tate. So it's a funny old circular world, but I'm glad he's out there. I'd like to meet him. Is he doing a fight soon? I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
That's pretty manly, right? Just like, yeah, sure, I'll fight him. Like, so yeah, I love that masculine is out there, and I don't think there's enough strong male force out there. And that's one of my things that I love in America, is when I'm amongst gun-toting, bearded men who farm the land or drive trucks. I'm obsessed.
What would you make of Tate converting to Islam?
Huh? Pardon me?
Tate recently converted to Islam.
I thought you said Kate. And I was like, are you asking, am I? Because I know I'm like not a complete arsehole, but I don't think I'm going that far. Like, I think he's pretty much got to make his own choices. And if he wants to convert to Islam, it didn't really change who he was to me, or who he is, right? Like, I haven't looked into what he's doing. I'm not following his journey to Islam, and nor would I be. But he's still a super masculine guy, and he's allowing my son to see something different. And that's pretty much it for me. Whatever he chooses to do religiously, that's not in my bag.
As well, okay, what's your opinion on the war that's taking place at the moment in Ukraine?
So this will be a leap, but so my view is that the Ukraine-Russia war is a contrivance. So there's always been animosity. There's a long history of conflict between those two nations, for sure. And for sure, there are many, many Ukrainians who wish to be Russian, and Ukrainians who identify as Russian. And Russia is Russian's one of the biggest spoken language in Ukraine. So the kind of that bordering on, teetering on, animosity, hatred, love has always been there. But I think the war would have been over a good year ago, if not more, were it not for the West's wish to perpetuate it. I think this war is a contrivance that's been put together to subdue Russia and Putin. I believe it's a kind of America-backed idea to animate the military-industrial complex. It's basically a way of processing tons and tons of cash via tons and tons of military. And, people make arms and war weapons. They make them because they need to get used, and they need a reason for them to be used in order for those people to make their money. And that's what Ukraine is. And if you speak to anyone from Ukraine, stop giving other people weapons and us, because we want this to stop. It would have stopped by now if it wasn't for America and Europe and all of these bloody fixed photographic PR press opportunities. Here I am. I'm now walking with Zelensky, Macron. Oh, here I am, Boris Johnson, walking with Zelensky. Here I am, Biden, walking with... Can we stop all walking about? Can we stop walking about with Zelensky? What did any of them do other than walk towards camera, look at a warhead, and take a picture where we both look concerned about the war? What? And people buy that shit. And then we saw from lockdown how brilliantly it works. If you push things into people's homes, they buy into them. So make it such that we can tell people how many you're allowed in your own home. So now what we'll do is we'll make it so that you're going to bring Ukrainian refugees, oh, the poor souls, bring them into your homes. For fuck's sake! In my road, we had 2 do-good families who had Ukrainians move into their bloody houses. And let me tell you, they pissed each other off pretty quickly, and those homeowners were working out how to get rid of them, because it turns out what they bought into wasn't the same as having people live in your actual house. And you'll know what that's like. I know what that's like. It's like you don't want people living in your home. So I just think it's a whole load of bloody bullshit, to be honest with you. I think it would be over a long time ago if we stopped messing around. And to all these people that bought into it, I'm like, 3 years of lockdown and a vaccine push, and you're still not waking up. And now they just sold you Ukraine, and you went, yes, please, I'll gobble that up. It's like, how stupid do people have to be? Also, I'm a fan of Russia and I like Putin, just saying.
As well, moving on to Twitter.
You're like, and the segue is Twitter. Smooth.
I want to talk about one tweet in particular that
Yeah.
I came across.
Hit it.
And obviously, you're obviously aware. It was, "Dear Marcus Rashford, do you think women should think about how they're going to feed a child before they decide to have it?" Looking back, can you see why, I guess, there was such a backlash from that tweet?
Holy shitbags, yeah. So I haven't been on Twitter for what? 5 years? 3 years? It's like it's been long. I can't think of how long it is, but it's long, right? Like really long. So there's a weirdness that my tweets still like turn up like yesterday in the Daily Mail. And it's like, that was so long ago. I can see why it pissed people off. But this was just coming out of Black Lives Matter. And then Marcus Rashford was feeding children. And then he was, oh, this is so great. He's a footballer, he's feeding children. But there's always going to be a sense in any society where you do need some kind of accountability. And I guess there was a sense for me that we do need to be thinking, before we have a whole bunch of kids, we do need to be thinking about how we're going to feed them. And I know there's this idea that school meals are going to feed kids. But any over-reliance on the state is against the core of my soul, because the state wants to control all of us. The state wants to have ownership of all of us. We just saw that play out with lockdown. And the more that you depend on the state, the more the state has control. It's, and so my push is always be self-sufficient, get away from the state. We need a tiny state and big people. So it sits in somewhere in a good place, but I can see how it pissed people off. And I can also see, particularly now, like 2/3 of the UK, or what is 54 million people will be effectively in fuel poverty because energy will be most of their bills. Like, shit does change. So you might have babies and then this happens, or this person leaves you or whatever. And, I bloody get that as well. But what I find at the moment is people are being pushed to a point where they think to themselves, what's the point of me trying to work? I'm working, and I get less than this person who can't or isn't working. And I could get a house if I just gave up. I could get this if I gave up. And it's like, I'm desperate for people. No, keep going, keep going. Don't let them take control over you. Yeah, I don't want the state to win. I really, really don't. I want people to just keep battling it out, because having your own, you may have next to nothing or nothing, but if you still have you and you know who you are and you're not dependent on anyone, that's got to be the best thing. So it sits in kind of a kinder place than it sounded, but I totally get that it pissed people off.
It's okay. What's your views on Rishi Sunak?
I will also say just one little thing is that us doing this and us chitty-chatting is a long form thing, right? So people get to listen to you for as long as they wish to, and then they can piss off or whatever. Twitter is very much like shooting, isn't it? It's like you shoot someone with 20 words and they're like, piss off. You don't get to do what we just did, which is the blah, 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 blah that goes around it. And TV is very similar. Rishi Sunak, I don't trust. Is not a conservative, a member of the World Economic Forum. It's not a problem to me that his wife is one of the richest people on the planet. Good for her. It is a problem to me that she claimed payments during lockdown for her company that now closed. It's a problem for me that She was non-domiciled, so she was avoiding paying tax in the UK. And it's a problem for me. It's also a problem for me that he's short, because you'll know I disagree with short people, and the trousers he wears are just ridiculous. But the fact that he's part of the global elite concerns me, because if you think as I do, which many people would call conspiracy theory, I believe that a global elite will take over all countries, that we'll lose our own governments or that they're already gone, and that this small global elite will eventually just control all of us, and we'll all be living in high rises, and our only use will be as a form of we'll be mined for our data, and that will be it. So that can make me sound like a weirdo, but actually I think that's where we're headed.
Fair enough. As well, okay, I want to ask about the time that you got kicked out of Australia and the logistics of what was actually happening behind the scenes.
It's a wild story. So in brief, the front end is I was asked to do Celebrity Big Brother in Australia. And I'd done Celebrity Big Brother in the UK, blah, blah, blah. And I was offered a huge sum of money, so I said yes. At the same time, Australia's locked down. Been locked down for 2 years. No one's allowed to leave. No one's allowed to come back. People can't go and visit their dead gran. People are stuck in the UK, can't get back to their own kids in their own country. But they're going to fly me in to do Celebrity Big Brother. Me, the biggest outspoken critic of lockdown, not the biggest, but probably one of them. And I'm like, righty, okay, yeah, sure. And I'm going to have to spend 15 days in lockdown, in quarantine, before I even get into the house, because I have to be, So I'm like, okay. And my husband, who is called Lovely Mark, like everybody calls him Lovely Mark because he's lovely. And he was like, he calls me Birdie. We don't need to go into that, but I don't really know. He says because I'm always like, anyway, he goes, oh, Birdie, I don't see quarantine going too well for you. And what he's trying to say is 15 days. I mean, you've already got a sense of it, but like 15 days in my own company, like, I'm really not, I need to dissipate, amongst people. I need to be around people. I'm desperate for not attention, but fuss. I love people. So anyway, he did warn me. So over I go, and 2 police officers have to come on the plane to take me off the plane. And I have to be in a police van taken to my isolation prison, which is actually a very nice accommodation in a high-rise building. But I am then escorted into the building. You have to be processed by a police team, taken up to the 26th floor by a member of the army and a member of the navy, and put in my quarantine room, prison. And they take the key. I'm not allowed a key. I'm not allowed to touch the front door of my room. I have to stay inside. When they bring my food, they're going to knock on the door. I have to wait 30 seconds. Then I'm allowed out. If I smell smoke, I'm being briefed on this. If I smell smoke, hear the fire alarm, I'm to wait in place. If there's a fire, I'm not going to wait in place on the 26th. But basically, rules. And I rules make me, I have like a, so already I'm like, oh, stop with the rules, stop. And the thing that really grips me as someone who, purposefully should be military, is someone had to brief that guy briefing me for him to brief me with those bullshit. Someone had to stand there with a uniform and a straight face and say, 30 seconds, they're allowed to open the door. When they open the door, they're allowed to get their food. To get their food, they must have a mask. And I was like, I cannot deal with this level of bonkers. So day 1 goes by in quarantine, I'm alone. I'm already at the window. I'm flashing my boobs at the office block opposite just for trying to engage with someone, but there's no one in the office block because it's locked down. I'm like, oh, geez. Day 2, 5 in the morning, and I was like, and I lost my shit. And I went online, did a live, and no one knew where I was. And I was like, I'm here in Sydney, and I'm in a country where no one's allowed to be, no one's allowed to come. People can't get to, and I frickin' went for it. And I gave it the whole, this is the tyranny of the people. You people need to rise up. I'm sitting in your country. I'm not vaccinated. I shouldn't be here. You are being pissed on. And look at me. Rah! And off I went. And I was being kind of funny, but I also was definitely trying to call out the hypocrisy of actually me being there, which is so insulting to people who needed to get to their children even. And I tell you, Off I went back for a sleep. I woke up and Australia blew up. It blew up. It was everywhere. It was on the morning TV. The production company were beside them, that they were in the shit with the channel that was going to make the show. The deputy prime minister was on a morning channel saying Katie Hopkins can pack her bongo drums and go home. I don't even play the fucking bongo drums. And all I could hear was these Australians being mad at this little tiny woman cooped up in a flat. And I was like, shit. And it was the story on every single paper. And, you know, there was going to be a lynch mob. And my lovely Mark's sister is Australian. And she was pissed off because she believed in the whole lockdown thing. It went crazy. And then for 2 days, it just got darker and darker and darker inside my prison. So they said that they were cancelling my visa. I never even, you know, they gave me the visa, and that I was now an illegal immigrant in the country. I never tried to get in. They brought me, and that I was going to be taken to an immigration deportation centre to be held. And then my electricity went off. Then they stopped delivering food because they said there'd been a poisoning attempt. And every 2 hours through the night, immigration would ring to talk. They wanted to do an interview about my illegal status. And it was 3 a.m., 6 a.m. And they just wouldn't let me sleep or eat. And it got really, I mean, there was a balcony on that frigging thing. So, you know, it's hard to imagine it now. I'm sat here in the studio with you, you're lovely. But you're on your own and they're taking away your light, your food. They're calling you an illegal. They're going to deport you. And it's like, holy, it got really, really dark. And then via some negotiation with lawyers and the rest, it turned out I would just be picked up, taken to the airport and deported. And so these wagons of police officers turned up like I was Hannibal Lecter, full breathing apparatus, all the rest of it, shoved me in a van. And there were cars around the van trying to take pictures into the van, like I was a mass murderer. Like it was exactly all that stuff. I was taken to the airport, and then I was walked onto the plane, onto my seat. And I honestly thought they were going to handcuff me to the seat and deported my ass out of that country. And then, of course, the British papers did the same, you know, Hopkins deported. Because I'd said on my live, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wait till the next time that they knock on my door with the food, and I'm going to grab the cooking oil from the stove, and I'm going to get naked, and I'm going to oil myself up, and I'm going to make a run for it on the 26th floor, and I'm going to grab a member of the military, and I'm going to do terrible things to him. And that was reported that actually happened. So the Daily Mail reported that I'd violated a member of the military on the 26th floor. And so it became a thing that I had run out naked, covered in oil. But I'd never left my room. I was just, you know, amplifying my message. So, so I was deported and brought back to the UK. And then there was security there to get me to my house. And it was the weirdest thing because I never actually left my quarantine room. I called out their own hypocrisy. And everyone who was involved in the process of getting me to Australia, production company, TV company, press people, media people, they all acted like they were never part of that journey. They disappeared, as if I'd somehow broken into the place all alone. It was just a good example, I suppose, of people ducking for, you know, self-preservation. So I was like, well, you know, now what to do? And so I did the thing I do, which I popped up here, and a week later I popped up in Arizona, in America, where I wasn't allowed to be either because I'm unvaccinated. And I went to a tattoo parlor, and it called to my soul because it was called the leap of faith, right? And I tell my daughters, you know, just go for it, you know, and I believe that for people, right? You never wait, just decide, because the worst that can happen is never that bad. I've done all of the worst things. And so I took my passport in with I've got a big red deported stamp right across my passport, and I got it tattooed on my arse. So, and then I sent a picture of that to the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. So I guess the story is, and I guess the point of it, if we're doing Aesop's fables, is just the hypocrisy of lockdown. and the cruelty of man and the ability of people empowered to believe their own bullshit to the point where they're willing to not only enforce it on a people's, but also involve military and police and brutality to impose rules on people that are blatantly ridiculous. And I see that, you know, that's my fear for this country, is if that's the way we're headed.
Great.
Isn't it? And I'm just me. This is the weirdest thing, right? I'm like little. When people meet me, they're like, "Oh, you're small," because they think that I'm going to be like 6'4" and covered in hair. I'm just this little ordinary woman thing.
You are.
Right? So how can I have caused an international incident?
Literally.
Literally.
I was going to ask as well about, why did you leave LBC? What happened? What was behind the scenes? Was it a tweet or?
So I had a radio show on LBC at 10 o'clock on a Sunday. And I was so lucky and happy to be given that show. And actually, we did the press picks for the launch of that show. I left my ward at the Hospital for Neurology, where I'd just had my massive surgery. I was there for about 3 months, I had to learn to walk and stuff. And I went to do the press picks for my new LBC show straight out of the ward, where I was rebuilding my head and arms and leg. And so I didn't know in my heart, and this is another big distance between real me and sort of people fronting me, is I didn't know if I would be able to do a radio show, because I didn't know if I would have the language and the cognitive ability, because speech was one of the things that I could have lost. My left arm, my left leg. I didn't know, would I have the kind of linguistic dexterity to still be able to do a radio show? So I had that private doubt, which was massive, and I had a radio show. But the radio show it turns out I did still have it, and I could still talk. And then people loved it, and it became the most listened to Sunday radio show on commercial radio stations, but it was the most listened to. So people they call it appointment listening, right? So people turn in just for that show. And my main audience, wildly enough, was 21 to 35-year-olds. So I had what should have been heart and like cool stuff. They were listening to LBC political commentary phone-in show. And it really pissed off the people at heart, because they couldn't get it. Why? And I know why. It was because a lot of young people, disagree if they wanted, couldn't find anyone just speaking their own truth, like talking their stuff, not minding being disliked, having callers ring in and go, "You are such a bitch, you know that. You are an asshole. You disrespect the faith. You did blah, blah, blah." And I would let them fly, you know, and it was great because they really meant it. And I would go, "I get it. You really dislike me and what I say." And you don't hear that anymore on radio. You can't find that anywhere. And so it was super, super popular. But there was a terrorist attack on, I think it was Westminster Bridge, I'm unsure, or London Bridge, one of the terrorist attacks. And my editor got in touch from Daily Mail and was like, "Bloody go ballistic," which meant for him, get writing and let it go, let it fly. And I was deeply upset. And this chimes with military and wanting to protect a country. And I went to Twitter and went, "We need a final solution to terror in the UK." And I'm kind of trying to evoke the idea of a lasting solution. This no more, never again, like the Dutch used to say about flooding, right? Never again, and they meant it. But instead of typing "never again," I put "final solution." And if you're anything to do with the Jewish community, that's offensive. If I can say, without wishing to antagonize further, it is still unclear to me why final solution is owned entirely by anyone. That is just 2 words and a phrase. And if you did try and just translate it in the way I meant it, lasting solution. But I'm not trying to defend it. I am trying to say I don't think any nation should have, or any religion has, ownership over words. But The Guardian, and I had some inside scoop, someone messaged me to say that The Guardian in their morning conference, which is how newspapers work, basically made it their thing. We're getting rid of Katie Hopkins today. And I got word. So anybody who ever contributed to LBC signed a thing to say they wouldn't come back on to LBC if I was kept on. And then there was a petition and there was the rest of it. But it was actually the pressure of all of those guests, high, decent political figures that we need. LBC needs guests to operate. And it was at a very high level, the top of government saying we won't come on again if she has her show. And so I had to go into that building for my meeting knowing that I would be gone. And I was let go. I was taken into a room with two guys, my boss and the legal guy. And they said, look, we just can't keep you. And it was very, very, very sad for all sorts of reasons. And people will say, well, you deserved it. You tweeted those words and that's unforgivable. But actually, I missed that show so much. And it's the thing I miss. You asked her actually what would be the sad moment. That would be definitely one of the saddest because it was nothing to do. I couldn't care less about me or the show. But I so loved that people would ring me on a Sunday and they would ring me in their pajamas and I could almost see them. Like they would ring me in their kitchen, they'd be getting their family lunch or whatever, but they were in their jimmies. And because of that, they would tell you things as if they were telling you their secrets. I guess a little bit how you feel when you're speaking to people and they tell you stuff they wouldn't tell someone else. And they would say it, and it was on radio, but they were saying, you know, I feel so upset because, and they would share this. And it was like a way of being in someone's actual home and listening to them talk. And that's why I miss it so much. And in fact, even as I was fired, my boss, James, who knew I could do radio well, we talked about how they were going to announce letting me go because they knew the sort of backlash was going to be horrific for them because the supporters who loved that show still love it. And so I worked with him on the timing of when they were going to tell people that I'd been humiliated and fired so that it would be less bad for LBC because I still love my show. So I had a female producer at LBC and I loved her so much and she was the opposite of me in every way. She not that her sexuality mattered, so she's a gay woman, but she's from the left. She loved The Guardian. She was as woke, but she is my producer. And we created this show that just was great. And I said when I leave, please, whatever happens next, please have a female producer because there's so few on the ground. But they didn't do that either. So that's my sadness, losing my I would love my radio show back or a radio show, but it would need to be a radio show.